Joining us right now, Texans General Manager Nick Caserio. Nick, welcome. Thanks a lot for spending some time with us. I know there are no moral victories, but the team performed a lot better this past week than the week before, and certain things moving in the right direction. Davis Mills bounced back. Your thoughts on what you saw on Sunday?
Good morning, fellas. Good to be here. Had our opportunities, made some plays and some improvements in some areas. Ultimately, in the end, didn't do enough to win the football game. Not to necessarily get into an evaluation of kind of where we are right now, but other than the Buffalo game, some of the core elements, some of those similar elements have kind of showed up in each game. So really the only thing we can do is evaluate what happened on Sunday. We were in yesterday. We went through the game with everybody, talked through some things. New opponent this week, so you really restart your clock and restart your preparation, new scheme, new players. So you really have to flip the page regardless of what the circumstances or the outcome of the game were. So did some decent things. In the end, just not enough to really execute to come out on top.
Obviously, after that one's over, Nick, everybody wants, oh, boy, we would like to see that Davis Mills every single week. We'd like to see him do that. But you look at the Buffalo game, and then you see the progress he made in New England. What did you see from him against New England? Maybe he wasn't there in Buffalo, or just the progress that he's made over the time he's been a starting quarterback.
Good question. Each week is a different entity. So specific to that game, made some good decisions, had some success early in the game, was able to develop a little bit of a rhythm and some confidence. We, as a team, we moved the ball, scored in the first two possessions, I believe. Long drive there, the first drive. So there were some signs collectively, not only him, but with some of the other players. So his preparation during the week was good. Pep and Timmy did a great job of getting him ready. So really what you want to try to do is erase, regardless of what happens in the game, even the New England game, going back to erase what happened, you go back through and go through whatever your process is of preparation to get yourself ready to play, to put yourself in the best position to go out there and hopefully play well on Sunday.
Nick, you had Chris Moore with a breakout game, for lack of a better way of putting it. You didn't have Danny Amendola available for the game. And do we make too big a deal about this guy's a slot receiver, this guy's outside? Can they change roles? It seemed like we saw that on Sunday.
To answer your question, Mark, the short answer is yes. So certain players have certain skill sets, and what you want to do, regardless of who they are, what the position is, put them in a position that accentuates their skills. So there's certain things in Chris's case that he does differently than Danny. Danny does things better than some other players. When you look at the arc of the league and the course of the league, there's certain players that are better in certain positions relative to others, but the way the offense is played, formationing, and where guys end up aligned, sometimes even a perimeter receiver ends up tight to the formation based on the condensed split, or you put him in a bunch formation, he's in a tighter formation. So really, it comes down to what are you asking that player to do, what's the assignment, and what do you do to help accentuate that player's skills to the best of their ability? So Chris and Danny aren't the same player. Chris had an opportunity. Danny wasn't available for the game. Chris went out there and took advantage of his opportunities. And this goes back to something that we talked about a little bit earlier in the season from the roster construction standpoint. Every player has to be ready to play in terms of their availability. So Chris was on the practice squad. We were able to get him to the game, and he went out there and played as if he were on the roster or any other player for that matter. So that's a good example of that particular, I would say, dynamic.
Nick, prior to, I can't remember if it was training camp or sometime during training camp, you were meeting with the Houston media, and you asked a question about just the results and wins and all that kind of stuff. And you mentioned the process, and the process being extremely important. No matter what you're doing, whether it's football, whether it's business, whatever, the process being important. Through 5 weeks, how have you perceived the process working the way you want? How have you seen that kind of manifest itself through the first 5 weeks of the year?
John, it's a great question. I think sometimes everybody gets caught up in buzzwords or words, process, culture, and you try to paint a mosaic of what that exactly means. Really what you're talking about is everything that goes into, from a player standpoint, being successful on Sunday. So their preparation, their practice habits, their regeneration, their recovery after practice, their nutrition, their sleep. Those are parts of their routine, and part of your process is establishing your routine on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, over the course of however many weeks you have in the season. So that's the most important thing. So every player is different. Everybody has to find something that works for them. Whatever your systematic behavior is that you feel is going to give you the best chance to be successful, that's what you're talking about when you look at a process or something that a player goes through. From an overall building standpoint, you're looking at all the different areas that touch the players. So from training room to doctors to nutrition to strength and conditioning staff to your sports performance staff. So you're looking at the comprehensive nature of your organization. Everybody sees what goes on Sunday, but there's so many other elements and so many other things that are involved. That's what you're actually trying to put in place and establish over the course of a long period of time.
How do you change that, though, during the course of the season? If you see something, this needs to be adjusted. We can't eat dessert on this day or whatever it might be. How do you do that?
No, it's a great question, Mark. And really, you have constant communication and constant evolution, and you look at action, result, and then you go back and make your assessment. And if there's something that we feel we can improve, then we'll talk about adjusting or modifying. So what you can do in season is going to be different than what you do out of season. So no problem, but we understand that. So you take the real and now, what can we do in the present? Where can we make some adjustments or improvement? And what you're trying to do is educate the players on this is why this is important. This is why this can help you, because you're really trying to get the player to optimize their performance on Sunday. So whatever goes into that, it's coaching, it's meeting, it's preparation, it's everything that goes along with that. So really, our responsibility from I would say, team building standpoint and roster construction standpoint is to get as many people in the building that either A, have an understanding of that, or B, will embrace that over the course of time. And it's just not necessarily about X and O's or how much play time I'm going to have.
You can see where Mark's focus is. He's talking about dessert over here.
Yeah, of course.
He wants dessert.
You're talking to the wrong guy.
Yeah, he wants cafeteria over there. Wants dessert. Nick, it's the Colts. We all know the Colts very, very well. You guys have known them. You've played them over the years. Frank Reich's been there for going his fourth year. Matt Eberflus has been there, very good defensive coordinator. What do you see with the Colts when you're able to watch them? I know they got the same record as us. They've kind of gone through the other night, kind of a tough one, 22-9. We had a lead. We couldn't hold on. They had a 22-9 lead. They couldn't hang on. What do you see in the Colts?
Good team, a lot of good players, which is typically the case on a week-to-week basis. Chris and Frank have built a great program. They've put something in place from the beginning, and they've had a lot of support from Mr. Irsay and ownership. So they're good on offense. They've been in a number of close games. Yeah. If you look at what's happened during the early part of the season, played competitively, really competitive against the Rams, played competitively against the Seahawks. Last night's game went to overtime. So they've essentially been in every game. The Miami game might have been the one game where there was a little bit of a gap, but acquired Carson in the offseason. Carson's played really, really well. Carson's a really good football player. He's started well. He's in a good system. He's in a good offense with Coach Reich and Coach Brady. They got a good group of skill players on the perimeter, a really good running back who not a lot of people talk about in Jonathan Taylor, but he's I would say a three-down back that does a lot of different things well. And then a good offensive line. They made some investments in the offensive line. They just extended Braden Smith. They added Fisher to help solidify what's going on at left tackle because Chris had some background with him. And then when you look at what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball, Matt's a really good defensive coordinator, has a system that he believes in, has a varied background. He's with Rob Ryan and Eric and going back to Cleveland. He was with Coach Marinelli in Dallas. And now he's in, Indianapolis and put his system in place. And they have arguably two of the best players at their position, forget about position on defense in the league, in Buckner and Darius Leonard. So they present a lot of challenges. So we're going to have to prepare and understand how they play and then in turn understand what we're going to need to do in order to be successful. It's going to be different than what the problems New England presented and the problems that Buffalo presented. It's just different week to week.
You had Kenny Moore when you guys were in New England, and it just got me thinking. We were talking about players because I always think of Kenny Moore because we've kind of joked on the air. It's you go to the Walmart bargain bin and you pull one out and you're like, hey, let's try this one. And Kenny Moore's turned into one of the better players in the league. This really isn't about Kenny Moore, but it's more about, was there ever a player that you had just kind of the one that got away, the one you feel like, God dang it, man, we had this guy, or I really like this guy, but you know what? It just didn't work. But, man, he went somewhere else, and he ended up being a big-time
I've got
player.
a nomination, Nick. Kamu Grugier-Hill, because he's
good
back
one.
here.
But
You got him. He got away, but you got
Okay.
him back here, right?
Okay. No. That was too easy.
All right.
That's pretty good. I would say in Kenny's, there's a lot of examples when you go back and look at the course of the league.
Yeah.
So Kenny was a good example. Kenny was undrafted, was a productive player at Valdosta State. I mean, he's a little bit undersized, so he's one of those players He was 5'8.5", 190. He ran well, had good time, speed. He played multitude of positions at Valdosta. Played safety, played some corners. So liked his position versatility. Similar to some of the players that we had in New England, I would say size-wise, I'm not saying they're the same player, but a lot like Jonathan Jones. So you're talking about two guys that aren't drafted or weren't drafted who have gone on and had really successful, productive careers. I'd say in Kenny's case, Kenny actually had a really good training camp. He was probably, of our corners at the time, was like the sixth corner, so he was in competition. The reality is you can't keep everybody on your team, and you have to make some difficult decisions at times. We all knew at some point Kenny was going to be in the league, just like KG was going to be in the league. And Kenny's done a great job. He's been a really good system fit for what Indy is doing on defense, has position versatility, plays in the perimeter and base defense, slides inside to play star in sub defense. So, and he's a very smart, he's a very instinctive player, which you saw those at Valdosta. We saw them in our training camp. And the reality is it's just hard to keep everybody.
Let's talk about offensive line depth here, Nick, because it was tested last week. You have Charlie Heck coming up to play, and you have Christian coming in at left tackle when Laramie has to go out. So you had to use these guys, and you ran the ball a little bit better than you did the past 2 weeks. So can you discuss that for us?
Yeah, offensive line, everybody has to be ready to play. Typically, even going back, teams were only allowed to take 7 offensive linemen to the game, or you typically only had 7. So you had one player to back up all 3 inside spots, and you had one player on the perimeter to back up both tackle spots. So now when they instituted kind of the 8th lineman rule, enabled you to get an extra lineman to the game. So in our situation, we actually went to the game with 7 because Marcus wasn't available because of his injury situation. So when Laramie went down, whoever the next tackle is goes in and played left tackle. It's Jerron. In this particular case, it was Jerron. And we had seen Charlie all during training camp. Charlie was able to get a lot of reps at right tackle because Marcus was in and out of the lineup. So they went in there, and it's a good example, really going with what we talked about with Chris, of being ready to play. You never know when that opportunity is going to come. But when you go out there, the expectation is you're going to play to a certain level. And those 2 particular players played to a certain level. So we'll see what happens here moving forward against Indy.
You said something last week, Nick, that stuck with me. We were talking about young players and drafting young players and bringing young players. You talked about the second year. Not the first year, but the second year. And that stuck with me in talking about Charlie Heck. Because Charlie in 2020, I mean, it was just everything was shortcut for those guys in 2020. Same for anybody in the 2020 draft class. You've seen a lot of improvement. Coach Cully said he's one of the most improved guys because he had a full offseason. He had a full training camp. He then had preseason games to go out and do it. How much did that 2020 class get sort of short-circuited? Because we're starting to see some of those guys kind of rise up and make plays. Charlie Heck, has played well, started for us. John Gennard has started to make some plays. How much did 2020 kind of set those guys back from impacting year 1, but now you're seeing it in year 2?
It's a great question. I would say it's really more of a bump in the road. And to go back to your earlier question, Mark, about process and what that entails, the reality, this is the truth. Most people, I mean, this is our belief and philosophy. Everybody doesn't share the same philosophy, but I would say from our perspective, when a rookie comes into the league, regardless of where they've played, how much they've played, there's a certain level of development that's involved. Sure. So you draft the player in May, whenever that is. They come in for rookie minicamp. So they get a little bit of the spring, they get training camp, whatever happens during the course of the regular season. More than likely they're going to be taxed more than they ever have before because of the arc and the length of the season. When the season's over, then you start your off-season preparation. So they go through February through however long. February, off-season program, OTAs, training camp. So that over from that, call it January to the start of training camp, that's where you can see some improvements in terms of their strength, in terms of their power, in terms of their explosiveness. Then you have to see, can they translate that over to the field? So in Charlie's case, this is a great example. So when the Houston season was over, when I actually was here in January, Charlie Heck was already in the building. So he started his preparation for the 2021 season then, which is why he made as much improvement as he did, because A, he made the commitment to, and B, he had the resources available to him and took advantage of them and put him in a position to actually be competitive. So the arc, the part of the process, going back to what you said earlier, it's really a full year cycle. And then once you get through that full year cycle, you hopefully have a decent idea of where he is and then how much maybe further room he goes. So regardless of the rookie, other than maybe some elite players, they're very far behind. So you don't want to put a timetable on when they're going to play, how much they're going to play, how big of a contribution that they're going to make. That's kind of for everybody on the periphery for you guys to talk about in the radio, because it's all fun and all that. But I would say when you look at it from running a team from a reality standpoint, we kind of have to look at it through a different lens.
All right, one more for you, Nick. Now that we're deeper into the season, what can you share with us about what you're doing during the game? Headset on, what kinds of information are it being relayed down to the sideline? Can you tell us about that?
Sure, it's really more observations, just kind of seeing the arc and flow of the game, just hearing what we're doing, what the call is, just making some notes, that type of thing. So really not necessarily inserting myself into anything. It's really more listening, really more observing, and if something does come up or there's a question or, hey, what about this? If there's a thought or something that I can contribute that I feel I can help, then that's kind of what sort of my role is. So it's really there to be a resource. It's really there to serve and to help, regardless of how big or small that is on a week-to-week basis.
Nick, thanks a lot for joining us. Good luck this week.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.